Yeah. And you you say power, and I immediately think of this conversation I had with my mom when I was going through some of my darkest days, going through that transition. And she said to me, "You have the gift of joy." And I thought about it, and I was like, yeah, I guess I do, because in going through some of that tough stuff, I never felt hopeless. I never felt like, I wouldn't even say I've even felt depressed. I mean, it was hard. Don't get me wrong.
Yep.
I wasn't like every day, but when she said that to me, I thought, that is a gift. Like
Yeah.
that goes beyond. We can't create that for ourselves. I mean, we can put ourselves in situations where we might be gifted with joy, but I thought, well, that is something to share,
Yeah.
because uh, what am I going to do with that, right?
Hey, what's going on, guys? I am thrilled to have this guest on the Ripple Effect podcast. Suzy Turner and I met at a conference back last summer. And I always tell you that the people that are supposed to show up in your life show up at exactly the time that they're supposed to. But what do I always say? You got to be looking up and looking out. And you have to be approachable and willing to engage, to explore why this magic happens when it does. Well, let me just say, Suzy showed up, I paid attention, and I recognized her as a Rippler from the moment we started talking. She was so friendly, so fun to engage. And when I really kind of got beyond the work that she was there to sort of represent and actually heard about her passion and her company that she does pretty much the rest of her time, I was hooked, because some of what she is doing has no doubt a major ripple effect in people's lives. But most of what she is doing is waking people up to the possibility of what they have deep inside here. And she uses music, and specifically drumming, as the wake up call, if you will. This woman is doing some incredible work. She has such a fun, really chill vibe and approach to life that when you spend any time with her, you just instantly fall in love with how awesome she is. And so we have been trying to get her on to the Ripple Effect podcast for a while now, because she is that cool. And I'm so committed to trying to help promote her that one of the things that we've done is we've actually brought her into the Ripple membership to actually help our members find their rhythm. And we have a segment that we're doing once a month in the Ripple membership to start teaching some drumming. Now, this seems weird because a lot of times people are like, wow, why would I care about that? You know what? Music has this amazing effect. It's calming, it's centering. It is something that sort of drives you from the inside. It lights that pilot flame of motivation and creativity. It's a mood changer. And when you have someone like her guiding you and directing you, well, it's a recipe for success, my friend. So if you're not on the Ripple membership, that is your loss, because we are doing monthly sessions with her where she is teaching. I've learned so much in just the first two sessions that she's done for us that I feel like I could never have gotten there in 10 years of trying to do it on my own. And I'm loving it. And I'm experiencing it myself in a way that is so powerful. I share that with her, how it actually made a huge difference in one of my days that just wasn't going that well. But I am so glad that Suzy came by the Ripple Effect podcast. I can't wait for you to meet her. Definitely check out her company. We give all the links and all that information, because if you have an organization or you have a group or a company that is looking for a shot in the arm in terms of doing something a little bit different, looking at something from a completely different perspective, I think if you bring her in, it's going to blow your mind. But let me show, or let her show you how awesome she is. Let me stop talking about it and let's dive into this episode. Hey guys, welcome to another episode of the Ripple Effect podcast. I am super excited to have Suzy Turner join us today. Suzy, welcome to the Ripple Effect podcast. How are you doing?
Thank you. I'm great. Thanks for having me.
I am super excited because I think my Ripple community is really going to benefit from this session. You know, kind of getting an opportunity to get to know you, some of the great work that you're doing, and there's just so many different. I've got so many questions, you know, that I want to dive into. But one of the things I always like to start off with in terms of my guests is to give people a sense of kind of your origin story. I'm kind of a big comic book nerd, and so I always like how the hero becomes the hero. So, can you give our audience just kind of a sense of how Suzy Turner became the awesome Suzy Turner that we see before us today?
Yeah. Well, it was a cold October night. Um, well, I was just thinking about this question the other day because I was interviewed for this newspaper article, and it was really interesting because they asked one of the questions they asked me was what my parents did right.
Oh, I
And
like that question. I may have to steal that one.
that's good, right? And
Yeah.
I thought about it, and as a parent myself, obviously, I've reflected a lot on my own upbringing because there's some things that I think they did really well and other things I wanted to try to improve on.
Yep.
But I think from a very early age, I was always nobody ever said, "No, you can't do that," right? In
Oh,
terms of what I wanted to try. And I grew up with two brothers, and I was your typical tomboy. I didn't want to do anything that my brothers were not doing. And I think that gave me just a little bit of um, confidence, that maybe a delusional sense of confidence. But I was a very physical kid, that kind of stuff. And so we I don't know that that has a whole lot to do with music, but I think it does have a lot to do with movement. And movement is a huge part of my life. It still is. I love exercise. I love fitness. I love being outside. That was always something that was uh, prevalent in our household. Sorry about the ding.
no problem.
And that being said, my musical background started when I was a little kid because my parents always had music on. Always, always, always. And to this day, I whenever I hear Motown, I have this compulsion to clean
Yeah.
because my parents would always play Motown and soul and old R&B when it was like Saturday cleaning day. And
Oh,
so
that's awesome.
yeah, right? And it still works for me. I put it on.
Yeah.
I'm like, all right, time to get
Yeah.
dirty. And so there was dancing, and that kind of stuff in the household, Saturday morning dance parties where dad would put his 45s on. So my dad was not a musician. My mom was. She played the accordion and mostly recreationally, but there was always a lot of respect for the craft. There's a lot of musicians in my family, and it was always spoken of favorably. It wasn't one of
Yeah.
those things where it was like, oh, musicians, like it's a bad choice. So I started playing an instrument when I was a little kid, fourth grade, fifth grade, whatever that is. And by the time I was in seventh grade, I didn't want to carry the instrument to school anymore because it was big. I played the saxophone, so it was a big case, and you felt like a dork, and you don't want to be that band kid, right?
Yeah.
And you're 12, 13, you're already going through all of that awkwardness. So my mom said to me, and I remember it so vividly. We were sitting at the dining room table, and I was kind of like, oh, I don't want to do this. But part of me liked it. I really enjoyed playing it. I just didn't want the hassle of all the other stuff.
Yeah.
And she said to me, just give it one more year. And I said, okay, fine. So I gave it one more year. And then by the end of that year, I had so fallen in love with the instrument and achieved a lot more. I was sitting first chair. I was getting into competitive playing. I was really getting into the meat of the stuff. And so by the time I got into high school, that was it. I was hooked. Music was my thing. I did the marching band, met all my friends. Like it was my world. And so I always tell my mom, I still tell her, thank you for that. Thank you for not letting me give up. And I've been able to use that with my son, and that kind of don't give up until you've tried it at least for a little while,
Yeah.
because you may not know if you like it. And now, interestingly, he's a musician too. But I didn't force it on him. I just happened to have the guitar hanging in the house, and he said, "Oh, can I touch that?" Sure. 4 years
Oh,
later,
I
here we
love
are.
that.
But yeah, so I think just being open to it, they were always supportive. They were always yeah, try it, maybe you like it. And my older brother was a musician as well. And I teased my mom because I remember there were plenty of days where I was in my room practicing my saxophone. My brother was downstairs playing the drums. And obviously it was loud. And I asked my mom, I said, man, how did you deal with that? And she gets this big smile on her face and she says, I loved it. I
Yeah.
loved every minute of it.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Oh, that sounds like they were extremely supportive and in a great environment to grow up in for sure, which I think is phenomenal. You don't often hear that, right? And a lot of times, parents, you get to a certain point, and parents kind of lose the luster in terms of the music as a possible career path or taking it serious in any respect. Do you
Yeah.
still play the sax?
I would love to. I still know all the fingerings. In
Yeah,
fact, sometimes when I can't fall asleep, I find my fingers doing the fingerings. But I know, weird. My son though, he played the saxophone, I guess 7th or 8th grade. He gave it a try, and I rented him this beautiful saxophone, like this, like because it was a lot more affordable than it was when I was a kid.
yeah.
For some reason, I guess they're just more available. But it was so nice, and I thought, let me give this a try. And I tried it and I could still do it, but man, the what's called the embouchure, I don't know if you're how familiar you are, but the way
No, but
you position your mouth,
yeah.
um, was hard and it hurt. And I thought, man, I used to do this 6 hours a day. I used to bleed and put tape over my bottom teeth, masking tape, so I could start playing because my teeth would like cut into my bottom
Oh my
lip.
God.
Yeah, I was like psycho committed, but it taught me I still know how to read music, certainly, and obviously it gave me an incredibly useful foundation for the work that I do now because I know there's a lot of folks that play drums that don't read music, which I mean you still can,
Yep.
obviously, because it's notation, but just in terms of understanding time and what from a musicality perspective, I feel like it was just a really great foundation.
That's awesome. So let's talk about that transition. Like, when you and I met, you were repping for a company, that sort of brings the musical experience into the school district kind of environment and public parks and, the public entities, right? But you actually have your own, venture that you're putting a ton of time and energy in called Soulshine Rhythm Experience.
Yeah.
So tell us a little bit about that and sort of kind of what the genesis of the idea was behind starting that.
Yeah, sure. So Soulshine came first before I got involved with percussion play.
Okay.
And so I started, you want me to go all the way back? How far back do you want me to go?
Does it start at that cold October night?
No, no, it was many years later. But having been around a musical family and playing music most of my life up until pretty much right at after college, and then I started my life, my career, got married, had a kid, and then one day I was like, I really miss making music with people. I had just moved to Austin. I didn't know a soul. I had this newborn baby. And I met this really wonderful group of mothers, and we were just a bunch of hippie moms trying to raise our kids, naturally. And we would get together, and we'd get together with the kids, and we would also get together without them and just kind of do things that were kind of fortify our interests, things that were different and unusual. And so one of the women found out that there was a woman who was beginning to teach West African drumming.
Mm.
And I had always loved hand drums, but my only experience of playing was pretty much at drum circles at Grateful Dead shows. Now you know how old I am. The first Grateful Dead, the real Grateful Dead.
The legit.
Yeah,
Yeah.
the pre-1995 Grateful Dead.
Yeah.
But so that was really my only experience. And of course, my brother was a drummer, so I always felt like it was his thing, and
Yeah.
so I never really wanted to step on that. That's all in retrospect. So I started going to this West African drum class. And what I loved about it is it really went back to the beginning because I've realized as I get older, I'm one of those people that I like to do things correctly, at least at first, right? Like learn it correctly, and then you can start to experiment and make it your own. But it was important to me to kind of find out how to play properly. So I took this West African drum class. We all took it, this whole group of women. And then 10 years later, I was the only one still there. And I fell in love with it. It was it was exactly what I needed. It was an opportunity to be creative. It was an opportunity to learn. It was an opportunity to have community and the music making process, which I missed so much. And I had a knack for it. And my little overachiever self, who was getting the pats on the back from the teacher saying, "You're really good at this." I was like, "Yay!" And so I thought, okay, let me just do this for as long as it makes sense. And so she ended up creating a performance group. And I just kind of naturally went into that. And we started to perform all around Austin, farmers markets. We worked in different therapeutic environments, Austin Recovery. That was my first foray into that world with drumming. And then just wherever people wanted to energize their crowd, we did weddings. And it was performance, it wasn't interactive. It was strictly performance. But we learned, I knew like 20 different West African rhythms and just knew them like that, and I just loved it. So that's how I really got into the drumming side of it. And around that time, I was still married to my first husband, and my son was about 2 or 3 years old. And it became evident to me that I was living in a very, very bad situation at home. And I made the difficult decision to leave the relationship with the support of family and friends, and just kind of illuminating for me, this is a toxic, abusive relationship, and
Yeah.
you need to get out now. It was one of those, in retrospect, I'm like, whoa, what did I wait so long for? But you do what you can.
Yeah.
So I got out of that. And I remember telling my drum teacher, I can't really afford to come to class anymore. I don't have a job. I don't even have a place to live. And she said, just keep coming. And I said, okay. And so I did. And when I think about that, and really, I'm getting to answer your question, it wasn't until about, gosh, I guess 5 years after that, that I realized that drumming is what buoyed me, what
Yeah.
lifted me up, what it was something for me to grab onto. And I stayed with it because it was healing me in certain ways, right? And or at least giving me hope
Yeah.
for whatever came next. So I remember I had kind of stepped away from it. I had moved away from South Austin, where I had been drumming with her, and I missed drumming. And I started thinking about it. It's about 2015, and I thought, what was it about that really kept me coming back? And I just started researching it. And I mean, it's all out there. I
Yeah.
didn't know because I never looked into it, but that there's so much happening physiologically, spiritually, emotionally when we drum together. And then I saw that there was a pathway for me to really pay it forward, I guess, was my
Yeah.
first thought. And that's when I had hosted my first drum circle. I said, I just want to
That's awesome.
see what would happen. Yeah. And they came, and they
I mean,
still come.
you think about that story when you kind of, break that apart a little bit, right? The realization that you had about your relationship and the fact you needed to do something different, the fact had that conversation with your drum teacher and they continued to say, "Hey, just keep coming," right? That
Yeah.
in its own right is a pretty powerful ripple, but then how emotionally connected you are to it, because I can see as you tell that story, really how this thing really has evolved to have so much meaning to you, and in a time in your life that like you said, really buoyed you when you needed it.
Yeah. Absolutely.
That's amazing. So you started doing the drum circles,
Mhm.
and sort of taking what you learned from the process of going through, that, I mean, even dating back to when you brought all these other, hippie moms, right, together to do that. I mean, that was a whole sense of connection, but how
Yeah.
you stuck with it and were able to recognize, hey, I missed this. I need to do something, to, kind of scratch that itch again, and then taking back out to create that level of community. And like you said, being able to do that with other people where it really shifts you emotionally,
Yeah.
and it connects on a level that is really, for some people, maybe they've never experienced something like that.
Yes. Yes. And that kind of feedback, I feel like, is a huge piece of what continues to fuel my sense of purpose with this. And I know that sounds kind of big. It sounds like it's my purpose to drum with the world. But I've had conversations with other musicians about this, people who drum because they are musicians and they love it. And I do love it, but I think it speaks to a different aspect of my personality, which is the service part.
Yeah.
I've always been called to that. I've always been a good teacher, I guess. People have told me over the years, and I think coming from a background of having teachers who were patient, and I just know how much that impacted me as an individual, not only as a musician, but just as a human being, being able to have the confidence to, like the first drum circle, I remember so vividly. I had drummers that I drummed with recreationally, but I wanted to see what would happen if I hosted an event, invited people to come. Would they come? Right.
Yeah.
And so I planned it. I put the word out there in the real and the virtual worlds. And then I sat back and started to freak out a little bit. I thought, what if nobody comes? What if everybody hates me,
Yeah.
And for me, that was actually really great because it highlighted that that's a thing that I had to look
Yeah.
at, was I have this issue with what if nobody comes. And then I thought, well, if they don't come, they don't come, and I'll just have my own little party and whatever. It doesn't mean they don't like you. It doesn't
Yeah.
mean that you're a terrible person. And so, right?
I love how you went right to that. That was like, I love
Oh,
it.
I know. They're all gonna
And the
laugh
fact you
at
pulled
you.
yourself back. I mean, most people would just stay there, right? In total fear, but I love it.
Yeah. And I thought, and so I said to myself, this is what I often tell myself when I'm trying a new endeavor. It's like, what is the worst thing that can happen?
Yeah.
Are you going to die?
Yeah.
Probably not. So then just do it. Right. And so I did. And people came. And now I am very happy to say, entering our 7th year of that community drum circle every month in Cedar Park. And it has grown to a community of over 1,000 people.
Wow.
They don't come every month. It'd be pretty cool if they did. But every single, and I'm going to say this as an absolute, I'm just going to go ahead and say it. Every opportunity that I've had for paid work as a drum and rhythm facilitator has come in one way or another, originated from that first drum circle.
That's awesome.
Yeah, kind of crazy, huh?
That is crazy. I mean, that's a testament to what you're building and what you've done. The the thing that really stood out, you and I met at a conference last summer, and I just knew instantly we were going to be friends because you have an infectious personality. And when you and I started talking about how I mean, we were both, at that conference, I'm representing a software product. You're representing, this equipment, a company, and really on the surface, it would be like, hey, you don't have anything in common, but we found this common connection point that we started talking about how important music was to us, and then you started explaining how you've taken, sort of a real commitment to help people in challenging times, understand and, how to find their rhythm, someone that's maybe, at their end of life in hospice or, in a bad, health situation, how that actually music has healing power. And, you and I were talking at that conference because I mentioned my mom had suffered from Alzheimer's, and
Mm,
the only thing that ever broke through that sort of just completely lost look that she had was to put music on that she really loved and
mm,
identified with. And then it was like a switch just turned on, right? It was like for just a brief, few minutes, you had, that person back. And I just was so taken with how you were so committed to helping people understand and appreciate that. So maybe you could talk a little bit about your work there, but it truly impressed me because without question, you probably didn't know, but I automatically knew you were a Rippler from right then and there. Cause I mean, you know how to take this, this power that you have and really help it do good for other people.
yeah. And you say power, and I immediately think of this conversation I had with my mom when I was going through some of my darkest days, going through that transition. And she said to me, you have the gift of joy. And I thought about it, and I was like, yeah, I guess I do, because in going through some of that tough stuff, I never felt hopeless. I never felt like, I wouldn't even say I've even felt depressed. I mean, it was hard. Don't get me wrong.
Yeah.
I wasn't like every day, but when she said that to me, I thought, that is a gift. Like
Yeah.
that goes beyond. We can't create that for ourselves. I mean, we can put ourselves in situations where we might be gifted with joy, but I thought, well, that is something to share because what am I going to do with that? Right. And what I noticed right away when I started hosting the drum circles and people started giving me their feedback, and the first thing they would say is you make everybody feel welcome. You have a way of making us feel like we're already friends. And I didn't know that about myself. I was happy to hear it because I want everybody to feel welcome. But when I really started to dive into how can I do this for real? Like how can I be a drum circle facilitator, which 5 minutes ago I didn't even know it was a thing.
Yeah.
So I started researching it. I started learning about different facilitators around the country, around the world that have been doing it for 20 plus years. Some of the people like Arthur Hull and Kalani Das, and they're two of the pioneers who really created a lot of the programming, a lot of the techniques, a lot of ways to make it accessible for everyone.
Oh, that's great.
And yeah, and I started reading the books, and then I saw I can train to do this. I can get go to get a certification for this. So I started signing up for all the classes I could do. I said, I'm just going to try to do one training every year until and once I made that decision, and I mean, I'm sure you know what that feels like when you're like, okay, I'm doing this. There's
I'm in, totally in.
Yeah, I'm all in. Drums started showing up literally on my doorstep. I came home one day, there was a box full of these Remo drums that I had been just drooling over. And a good friend of mine surprised me by sending them to my house. People started to associate me. Oh, Suzy Soulshine, she's that drum lady. And people would say, oh, I've got this drum in my attic, So within, I would say, a year and a half, I went from having 2 djembes, two drums, to having 15. And then it just kept going. And then I started to actively, save money for drums. And then I started, and you're probably wondering why I need all these drums. Well, because to share them.
Yeah.
And so people started saying, oh, this would be really great at my, I don't know, people just started referring me out to friends and family. So I started doing private parties. Once I got my training certified, trained in an evidence-based protocol called Health Rhythms, which was created by music therapist and a neuroscientist combination out of the Remo family. It was really born out of, they were pioneers in the therapeutic drumming world. And they were one of the first to see, okay, it's more than a musical instrument. It's really a tool for connection.
Yeah.
And when you go back, obviously I'm all over the place right now, but if you go back thousands of years, pre-lingual communication was music or sound that then became more refined into music. But the drum was certainly at the core of that. And so, the original form of storytelling, this and that. So it already resonates with us at a profoundly
primal
deep
level, right? I mean, at the end, yeah. That's
exactly.
crazy.
The heartbeat.
Yeah.
So anyway, started looking into the different applications, and what quickly became my bread and butter was working with the seniors and dementia care. And word spread about this, and I started getting calls from all these different recreation directors at different communities. And then I started working with addiction recovery. There's another program called Rhythms to Recovery that I became trained in. Simon Faulkner out of Australia actually created that program, and he was a therapist first, and he started seeing that his clients, a lot of adolescents and kids in difficult situations, coming out of different traumatic events, he started realizing, well, they're not talking to me, they're not opening up.
Yeah.
And how can I help them if they're not going to share? So he was a non-musician, and he created this incredible drum-based, rhythm-based program to work with in a therapeutic capacity. So being in those trainings with these other people, music therapists, art therapists, musicians, you start to realize, wow, there's so much opportunity to help people here. And then I started to get into the corporate team building side of things. And that, again, it's about the human experience,
Yeah.
and rhythm is a language we all understand.
Well, and like you said, I mean, it's one of those things that when you and I first started talking about, you often hear from people like, I have no rhythm whatsoever, but you do.
Yeah.
All you have to do is look to your heart and
Yep.
find that rhythm that is naturally, dictated by your just being, and that's a good baseline to start. But it's interesting because one of the things that I think that I've learned through you is that you start through this experience and you learn something about yourself, but then the community aspect of what you're doing, when you have that experience with other people, it becomes almost instantly magical because it's an anchor to something that is so much more rewarding and so rich when people can actually have this experience collectively, whether it's in a corporate environment or whether you're in a situation where like folks that are in recovery, they need that thing to hang on to that allows them to put their energies and their focus on something that's different than whatever their addiction was.
Yeah.
um, I just think that it's brilliant, and certainly there's no better person than I've seen that could lead that charge than you. I mean, you are phenomenal in terms of how you go about and do it. For those that don't know, for my audience, Susie's part of our Ripple membership program, and we've actually carved out a little space each month for you to do finding your rhythm with Susie Turner, because you and I, when we hit it off, I just knew that at the end of the day, people go through all sorts of stresses. There's all sorts of challenges that we experience. Sometimes we get off rhythm. Sometimes we, get off
Mm.
track, and we need something to get us back, and figuring out how to leverage your genius, which is truly is that, to help them realize how to get back to, that rhythmic state. It really does put you back, brings down your blood pressure. It brings, there's all these health benefits, but it also resets you mentally. And so
Mhm.
prior to a big meeting or a Zoom call or going on stage to give a keynote, utilizing your sessions to get our members to say, hey, let me stop a little bit. Let me refocus, recenter. Let me do a little drum lesson with Susie. And I can do it on demand. It's been amazing.
Cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think you nailed it when you say finding your rhythm, because, and as you mentioned, so many folks, that's the first thing they say, I don't have any rhythm.
Yeah.
And so much of that originates, speaking of origin stories, at in a moment that you likely can't even remember, when somebody teased you about your dancing, or maybe told you, I don't know, you're not creative, or whatever it is, and that kind of embeds in you forever. And
Yeah.
until it's dislodged uh, with some kind of opportunity, and rhythm is such a great tool for that, you don't even realize that you're sitting there with that. And I think that's one of the, well, and I guess you kind of think, well, why does it matter? Why does it matter if I think I'm creative, or why does it matter if I think I'm musical? It, speaking of ripples, it's a ripple maybe in the wrong direction,
Right.
where you limit yourself to not try new things, or you feel inhibited because you don't see yourself as a certain way. So therefore, you're going to cut yourself off to try something that you may have done if you viewed yourself differently. And when I hear those empowerment stories from people, which I hear them a lot, and oh my gosh, it's such a blessing. It's
Yeah.
gonna, I'm gonna cry just thinking about this one story. But I have had people in their 80s and 90s tell me that they've never played an instrument before.
Oh,
And now they're playing drums with me. There's this one community I come to twice a month, and we actually did a performance last for Christmas for the rest of their community. And we got the idea because, they were feeling their progress, and they were feeling the bond, because it becomes, when the same people keep showing up, it becomes profoundly connected.
yeah.
And it shows up not only in the music, but just in the physiology of how we feel. That's not even getting into what's going on in the brain. But I proposed to them. I said, what if we perform for the rest of the community, so they
I
can see
love
what
it.
we've been doing, right?
Yeah.
And they thought, oh, and these are, very demure Southern women. And they said, well, I don't know if we can do that. And I said, heck yeah, we can. So I taught them a traditional Middle Eastern belly dance rhythm, and they learned it. and we put together a little program, a little choreography, and performed it. It was absolutely incredible. And I just thought, I mean, yeah, where it's the value is in the doing, right? It doesn't
Yep.
have to be perfect. You just give it a shot. And for them, even they tell me these stories about things that have been shaken loose, and in their hearts and in their minds about different experiences and the limitations they put on themselves. And even if you are, like you mentioned before, end of life clients that I work with, people in dementia care, um, it's still, why not add just a little more fun, a
Yeah.
little more peace to your existence. So when I think about finding your rhythm, that's really oftentimes how I will communicate it to people. I'm just here as your guide. I'm going to help you kind of clear away all the gunk that may have covered up your rhythm, the stuff of life, the trauma, all the things that we take on. And I still do it for myself. It's not like I'm just every
Yeah.
day. Like there are days where I'm deeply out of rhythm and I have to step back and take a little bit of my own medicine. But it works.
Well, and I think that's the key, right? Is the ability for you to recognize when you are out of compliance, so to speak, and you're out of rhythm in that regard, and being able to pull yourself back in. And I think the thing that I so admire about you and what you're doing with your work is that you make this so simple and easy to do that anybody can do it, regardless of your past experience musically or not.
Yeah.
And the value that I think that it brings to the table for someone is when they can pull themselves out of a bad mood or a funk that they might be in, just finding how to get back sort of in sync and kind of get that ball rolling. It's amazing the ripple effect that has, because it changes your attitude, it changes your mindset, and it completely changes your emotional state, which I think is
Mhm,
really key. And like you said, when you can do that in sort of self heal yourself in those moments, in those situations, or
mhm.
you're going through a really rough patch or you're a health crisis of some sort, and it gives you that respite from the crazy
Yeah,
stuff that you're dealing with. Those things have such a huge impact. And so it
yeah,
makes, I can certainly see why you get emotional about it, because you are making such a huge impact in these lives. And it might just be a small moment in time, but that moment becomes the lesson. The lesson is something that they can use forever, right?
yeah,
I
yeah.
think that's the cool thing about it.
Yeah, absolutely. And a really cool ripple that happened pretty early on, in me doing this when I wasn't even quite sure what my mission was
What
yet.
this was, yeah.
Yeah. And this woman came out to one of my drum circles in Cedar Park, and she was kind of shy. She just kind of sat there and watched for a while. And I always bring the drums. So if you don't have a drum, it's okay. You can use one of mine. And then I also have small hand percussion. So I'll have like little egg shakers and other small things. So maybe you want to participate, but the drum is a little too daunting at first. I will offer these other small instruments. So I had gone over to her, and I try to, especially when there's a new person, I always try to go and welcome everybody individually. And I've been very much supported by our regulars, so I can step away from my drum and do that, which is really great. I call them the Soulshine ambassadors.
I
And
love that.
so they're so great. So I went over to her and I gave her a shaker and I said, "Here you go. Feel free to shake it if you wanna." And within a few minutes, she had elevated to a larger percussion instrument, and by the end of it, she was drumming. And
Oh, it's awesome.
it was super cool to watch. And I didn't, obviously I didn't point it out or anything, but so she left, and I didn't, really get her name or see her in order to say goodbye. But I was just happy that she had that experience. Well, she came back to another circle and she told me the story how stepping into that circle was a tremendous act of bravery for her. And she was always curious. And she heard it, it sounded good. She wanted to check it out. And so she felt so comfortable and so welcomed by her community that it actually inspired her to another act of bravery to do something else that she had been wanting to do. And she didn't specify what it was, but she
Wow.
specifically said that she's like, "Well, I figured if I can do that, then I can do that." And I was like, "Yeah,
Yeah, that's awesome.
that's what it's all about, right? And
That's
I mean,
right.
the same thing has happened for me. I mean, the first time I did a corporate team building event, the first big one I did, the woman called me up and she said, "Hey, can you do 75 people?" And the biggest one I'd done was like 20. And I said, "Yeah, sure."
Yeah, I'll figure it out.
All right, drums. We need some more drums.
Yeah.
But you find a way.
That's awesome. Well, I have to give a personal story. You did the first session for our Ripple membership last month, and I loved it so much. I've gone to it a couple of times, but I was really stuck creatively on something I was having to put together for a project. And it just normally I have, kind of an approach that I take when I'm writing something or I'm trying to put together a program. But for whatever reason, this just was not coming to the surface. I couldn't figure it out. And then I was like, I'm going to your session and I'm going to put it back on and I'm going to go through it because I need to distance my brain from trying to wrangle this problem of how to produce whatever this is. And I'm in the middle of your drum session and one idea sparked and then another idea sparked. And then by the time I was done, I had like a whole, list of things that I could come back and write down. And it really was that impactful. And, that was like session one, right? You're teaching the members just how to find that first, sort of confidence to start, kind of the rhythmic approach. But
Yeah.
that little activity had such a huge ripple. And it literally 20 minutes after I was done with your thing, I had written the entire thing and already presented it to a client. And I was just like,
Oh,
so
that's
it
so
it
cool.
works. I mean, it does work. And so I see why, no matter what the environment is, if people will give it a chance, if they'll just allow themselves to step outside that box and have some fun with it, that
Yeah.
you can, and you're a great spirit guide in terms of helping them find that rhythm. It really has a payoff. I am a true testament to that. So
I
there you
love
go.
that. Thank you for sharing that with me. And again, it's such a good reminder to do it
Yeah.
myself. And I mentioned before we got on air that I was working on a project, or rather a presentation. And I'm not a huge lover of sitting in front of the computer and typing things and bullet points and PowerPoints and all that. But it's a research-based presentation, so I'm trying to do it
Yeah.
right. And all I wanted to do the whole time was go play my drum. And I didn't. I was like, I gotta do this, I gotta finish this. And now you're kind of giving me permission to step
Yeah.
out. It'll probably help me coast through those little stuck points a little bit.
It will. I promise you. It definitely did for me, and if it'll do it for me, I think it'll do for for you and just about anybody that gives it a whirl. So
Nice.
let me switch gears a little bit because I want, one of the things that we do in this podcast is I like to always ask ripple connection questions just to give a little bit, more of a, look see into who my guest is. And I really love what you're doing, with your work and the process that you take and just the genuineness that you have behind what you're trying to contribute to the world. But let me ask you, what is the best thing in your mind about being an entrepreneur?
Oh, I guess it's the freedom. Um, I, I've always been a pretty self-motivated individual. Obviously I have some areas where I need to focus a little more discipline wise, but
As we all do. It's
yeah, but motivation has never been an issue. So I really think that, and then the variety of people I get to meet in
yeah.
so many different places and spaces. And I love those moments where they show up later down the line in ways that you never could have imagined. And I find myself being very grateful that I took some advice that was given to me when I was very young about burning bridges.
Hmm.
And not that I was ever, like a mean-spirited person in any way, but I just remember that so vividly. It was when I worked at IHOP, of all places, when I was a teenager. My manager there, and it wasn't even, the advice wasn't really directed to me. It was because somebody there had done something and he was no longer welcome back. And so the manager was like, "Oh, TJ, don't
Yeah.
burn your bridges." And I thought, "Oh yeah, it's good advice." And so I really took it to heart. But I find if you operate obviously authentically and with integrity, and it's amazing what will happen. Like, people will think of you for an opportunity,
Yeah.
and that I've just been just blown away by. So that's probably one of, well, that's two things, I guess. Freedom and variety of connection.
I love it. I love it. Well, I think you sort of answered this question, but I'll give you an opportunity in case there is another version that you might want to share. But what is your superpower?
Oh,
Find bringing joy to everybody. It was definitely on there, so that's a hard one to beat. But do you?
yeah. What is my superpower? Um, Man, that's a good question. Different people would probably have different answers if they were speaking on my behalf. But it's like that delusional hope, maybe. Like, I I kind of, and I was just talking to my husband about this last night when we were talking about my presentation, and he said, he's like, "Oh man, I'd be freaking out right now," and I'm thinking to myself, should I be freaking out right now? Maybe
Thanks
I
for that
should.
advice, honey. I
Yeah,
appreciate
maybe I
it.
should be freaking out, and I'm not. I've always had this willingness to just try it and see what happens.
Yep.
So I don't know, especially as an entrepreneur, that has been a very useful tool in my kit.
I love that. Well, and I think it ties to the advice you gave earlier, which is, what's the worst that can happen, right? That's the best question that you could ever ask, when you're faced with doing something different or taking on a new challenge or a new opportunity. Like you said, if it's not going to kill you, then,
Yeah,
what do you
or
have?
anybody else. I guess
Yeah.
I should
Yeah. Clarify that a little bit, I guess. But
as
yeah,
long as nobody gets hurt in the making of
yeah,
this
yeah,
idea.
exactly. Yeah, no, I
Then
get that for sure. Where do you find your inspiration?
ooh, so I love fitness. I love lifting heavy things. I like challenging my body. And over the years, I've learned, and I have early beginnings as an athlete, and I'm so grateful for that because it has given me a real intuition into if I'm feeling something in my body, there's probably something going on in my heart.
Yeah.
And if I feel strong in my body, I feel strong in my mind. And I will find a lot of the time when I'm doing something physically challenging, it sparks my creativity. And I often have to like resist the temptation to stop what I'm doing, to break form and go write it down.
Yeah.
but but yeah, that particularly when I'm doing something that is really challenging. It's like ding, I get an idea.
Yeah.
So
I like that. That's great. What do you think the most important thing in life is?
God
Yeah.
for me. It's it's interesting because having kind of grown up in a uh, religious household, and there's certain things that you as a kid you kind of annoys you about that, right? Because you don't understand the significance yet. It's
Yeah.
just like something you have to do. It's like, oh, I have to
Again?
go,
Yeah.
yeah, I have to go to church. I got to put this dress on.
Yeah.
What? Can't tell you how many arguments I had with mom about Sunday dresses.
More than one, I'm sure.
More than one,
Yeah.
yeah. But as I've gotten older and I got to those different places where I thought I could do it on my own, um, and realized that I always really, by the grace of God, came through some situations that I can only say were miraculous,
Yeah.
and that is something that I've learned as an adult that I just can't ignore that. So
I love that. That's great. If you were to share one piece of advice with anybody out there that, may think about picking up an instrument or are mildly curious about, how to find their own rhythm and the importance of it for their work, their personal, sanity, their own ability to build their community, what would that advice be?
okay. So if someone who's looking into trying an instrument for
Yeah,
the first
try, you've piqued their interest. Now they're thinking about it. They are, trying to, sort of come to grips potentially with what
yeah,
they could bring to it
okay,
potentially.
yeah.
You could play on that any way you want, right?
Yeah.
So,
Well, I think, and this is based on my own personal experience of, a lot of years. I won't give exact numbers, but going back to my little childhood, I think there's a lot of value in finding a good teacher. And a good teacher is not always the best musician. I think that they're, since we're talking about music, and what I mean by that is just because you're a great musician doesn't mean you're going to be a great teacher.
Yep.
And you could be, could go both ways. You could be a great musician and a great teacher. But I think having somebody that understands the craft, the instrument, whatever it may be, and can break that information down in a way that you can create a really good foundation is going to inspire you as you grow. And I think about it a whole lot as a foundation, because there's no reason you can't just experiment and play around with a drum. There's absolutely no reason you can't do that. And depending on your personality, that might suit you just fine. But I think that ultimately a teacher also provides some level of support as you go down that journey, because if you're not getting the sound or the feeling that you'd like, it can just be a good resource. And that's not to say that you have to stay with your teacher forever, and then also getting with other people, people who are like-minded, and in the sense that are looking to explore the musical creativity, can be a really fun place to go, because you just play off each other. I think and again, I can geek out on the origins of music, but really the beginnings of it, before it became commodified, where we spend money to go listen to somebody play an instrument, everybody had instruments in their home. Most families, that's what they did at the end of the night, right? Was tell stories and play the piano, play the guitar, play the banjo, whatever form it took. And it was just part of the human experience. So I always like to remind people that it's accessible. You don't have to be a musical person to play an instrument.
Oh, I love that. What's the best thing oh, sorry about this. I have a clicking thing over on my side, so it hears these things and it kicks on a light. And so but it's Darth Vader, so it talks every time that it comes on.
Nice.
I meant to unplug it before we recorded, but
what a nerd.
Yeah, I'm a total nerd. Yeah. Yeah, it's so sad. It's so sad.
We're all nerds. We all geek out on something.
Yeah. Yeah. What's the best thing someone that's come to a drum circle, attended one of your workshops, participated in, a session that you've given somewhere, what's the best thing you could hear them say about you and the experience that they had with you?
Oh, well, it's a really good question. So I think it's probably less about what they can say about me and more about what they can say about how the experience made them feel. Sometimes I overhear them or participants talking after having a Soulshine Rhythm Experience, and they'll express surprise. They'll say, "Oh, I didn't expect to feel so relaxed," or "I didn't expect to feel so energized," or "I didn't expect to feel so connected." And I can cite one thing that somebody said that really blew me away, and I think about this all the time. There's one of the inpatient recovery communities that I do a drum circle with every month, and I rarely get to the same participants because we only do it once a month, and it's a 28-day program. So I really have to bring my A game every time. And obviously you're dealing with different people, so the experience is a lot of improvisation involved, because you are serving the circle. So you may come in with an idea, but you really have to meet everybody where they're at, what their dynamic is, read the room, and figure out how you can best serve their needs. And so at the end of this one particular session, so we like to go around the room and everybody shares something that they want to share if they choose to. And I find that transition is helpful, rather than going from deeply connected into the rhythm and going, all right, back to real life. It's uncomfortable. So we do that. And this one young lady, she said that she felt more connected to everybody after that drum circle than she ever has in one of their talk therapy sessions.
Wow.
And that was an hour. We spent an hour together and we were strangers. I mean, I was a stranger to her. They knew each other, but I just thought, man, that's it.
Yeah.
Like that's, if I could bottle that up and give it out to people, well, I put myself out of a job, but it,
Or you'd be super rich because you're
I mean, yeah,
manufacturing those bottles, right?
that's true. But now I'd be giving them away because I'm an idiot. But I think that, yeah, that is something. And if I had anything to do with that, then that's my gift. You know, that is, I have good days and I have bad days. And whenever I'm interacting with people and I step into that circle, I always come out feeling better, but
Yeah.
there are sometimes, you know, that whole careful what you wish for, you know, I get to do this for a living. And there are some days when I'm hauling 50 drums into my car 3 times a day. And I'm just like, I gotta do another one. And then I think, I literally want to slap myself and go, what are you talking about? This is awesome. But when I get into that room with those people and we just connect on the human level, and I walk out of there feeling amazing. And I think, wow, what a gift.
Yeah.
How cool is that?
Well, you know, I often talk about the ripple for me is always about that heart to heart, belly to belly connection that you make, and you're doing that through your work. And so I can relate because you'll be at an event or you have to go do something and you're like, yeah, I know for me, it's like, I've got this mental drain, don't want to do it. But then once you're in there and you see people, that light goes off and they get the ripple and they're like, holy crap, this is the coolest thing ever. It's like the greatest reward ever. So
Yeah.
I totally identify. Last 2 questions. What does the ripple effect mean to you?
Oh, man. You know, I can't help but think of it in visual terms, because I think about my life path and what I set out to do when I left the nest. And then life happens,
Yeah.
and you have choices that you can make along the way that are either going to improve you or send you down the wrong path. So I picture it a whole lot like surfing. You know, it's that wave experience of finding your balance no matter what is coming at you, right? And then leaning into experiences that you know, from an intuition perspective, like maybe you're surprised at this opportunity, however it feels good, it feels right, like really paying attention to that. So I think that the ripple has been most beneficial to me when I trust my gut.
Oh,
And I will say my gut has almost never been wrong, but that doesn't mean that I've always trusted it. I've made a lot of bad decisions because I didn't trust my gut. And so I think the ripple happens when I trust my intuition.
I love that. That's fantastic. Well, so what ripple can I create for you?
Oh man, you already have. That's a really good question. I don't know. Just keep sharing your experiences with rhythm and how you don't even have to mention my name if you don't want to. Just
But I will because I want to. So yeah, I
just
feel
talk
cool because I've got a cool friend like you. So it makes it really easy.
yeah, just keep sharing those positive experiences with rhythm and interactions that you've had, and how you've utilized it in your personal and professional experiences. And you know, every once in a while throw me a referral. And
Yeah.
I mean, every time I was talking to my son on the way back to the house, to prepare for our conversation today, and he was asking me what I got going on this afternoon, and I told him about you, and he was like, "That's pretty cool." So if you get approved by a 16-year-old, you know that you're cool. So
Sweet.
there's that.
Yeah, that just made my day. Tell 'em thanks. I appreciate that. Thanks
But
for
yeah,
sharing that.
I know. And I really enjoy your energy. I love your positivity. I know that sounds very cliche, but it is so authentic every time that we connect. And I can't explain why you were so interested in what I do, but I'm grateful that you were.
Yeah.
And I love that that you have a personal experience with rhythm as well. And I have a few people that I would like to connect you with
All
that
right.
I've
I'm in.
recently met. I'm kind of going through a vetting. I'm like, are these people cool enough to talk to Steve? I gotta make sure.
I
But
appreciate it. Well, I'll take any recommendations, any connections that you want to make. I will take them because I think the world of you, and I'm so grateful that we connected. We struck up a conversation, but more importantly, that we become good friends. And I'm so thankful that we're exploring this together and finding different ways to ripple and support one another's work. So I think it's really cool. It's exactly what I talk about, right? It's about, looking, beyond, the surface connections that people often make and find a way to try and create some valuable meaning. And that's what you're doing
yeah,
through your work. It's what I try to do through my work. And so I'm so thankful that we have the opportunity to maybe do it together. So,
yeah,
and we're going to find some stuff to do together. I promise you.
absolutely.
I want to make sure that everybody has a good understanding of how you want them to find you out there on all the social platforms,
Mhm.
and give your website and make sure that everybody knows how to get in contact with you and understands that, hey, if you've got an event and you want to do something completely different that will
Mhm.
completely blow everybody's mind, they need to be calling you, right? So
Absolutely. If you
explain
want.
how they can get in touch with you.
Well, I'm on social media, Facebook and Instagram at Soulshine Rhythm. And rhythm and Soulshine is one word. And rhythm, I'll let you Google that. No, rhythm, it's one of those words that even when I write it, I have to think it. I'm like
Yeah, I
RHYT.
misspell it all the time. You've actually been a big help in that I'm actually typing it correctly now.
Oh, nice. Yeah. Well, soulshinerhythm.com is my website. I will give you the disclaimer. It is under construction at the moment. However, you can always email me at connect@soulshinerhythm.com. And then, of course, find me on all the social pages. And I offer free consultations if you just want to talk about if this is something that you think would be beneficial to your group or your community, and we can figure it out together.
Yeah, and if you're in the Austin area, you do a monthly drum circle. So how do
Yeah.
people, learn about that and participate?
Sure. So that is posted on Facebook. There's a Facebook event for the next one, which is coming up on January 22nd. It's a Sunday, and we go from 3 to 5 in the afternoon. That one's hosted in Cedar Park at Veterans Memorial Park. So I don't know if this will be broadcast before or after that, but it's every fourth Sunday of
Every
the month.
fourth Sunday. Okay, cool. Very cool. Well, Suzy, thanks for taking the time out of your day to be a part of the Ripple Effect podcast. I am so grateful. This was phenomenal. I know we'll end up having to do a follow-up episode because there's just so much more that we can learn from you and learn about you. But I just want to say thank you. And for my audience, we'll be back again with another episode of the Ripple Effect podcast really soon. But in the meantime, be sure to go follow Suzy on all of her social platforms. Check out the work that she's doing. Be sure to get on the Facebook group. Attend a upcoming drum circle, which I plan to do, and just come out and have a blast because she will make it fun. I promise. And
Yay.
so, until next time, my friends, everybody go out there, make a difference in the world, make a difference in someone's life. You'll end up making a difference in your own life. And as always, ripple on.